Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of her Progeny. We live in a time where information is everywhere around us, and yet it's harder than ever to be able to distinguish truth from falsehood. And it leaves many wondering about what's actually true and who is actually responsible for preserving this truth. And so today's conversation sits right in the middle of this topic and in the heart of this question. And we're going to be discussing it, inshallah, with Sister Rida Fatima. Thank you so much for being here.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. So like we just said, the time that we're in, we are bombarded with information. There's news, there's social media, there's WhatsApp forwards, there's the groups, and we're just constantly being spoon-fed lots of information, and it's very easy for someone to lose track of what's actually true, what's not true, or what it's based on. Have you had such an experience in your time in uni, in your master's, in the community work that you do? Is that something that usually people talk to you about?
I think right now it's important to understand that the current landscape of where we are in the world in the Shia community is something that we have to understand. It's a pivotal point in history. It's a time where we will probably narrate to our children and our grandchildren, and it's like a turning point of Shia history. But amidst this, when we are seeing, our brothers and sisters suffering all around the world, of course, there's going to be certain narratives, especially living in the West. It's really important to understand that once you have understood the importance of the Shia narrative and what exactly we're dealing with, because if you are standing in a pivotal point of history, you have to understand that every single person then has a duty. And what exactly is that? It's the truth, right? It's something that we're talking about, Tabyeen, and understanding the truth. And if you're in such a setting, especially in the West, where there are headlines and narratives and, media and social media is so that's where everyone's attention is. People turn towards Telegram, and it's very constant, right? I think in the beginning, you have to take a step back, understand what you're exactly dealing with, and then you have to go from there. So even when we talk about Tabyeen, I feel like we see it a lot. Like on Instagram, sometimes people have it in their their username. It's something that is used a lot, but the actual origin and the actual importance of it, I think we haven't fully understood it or grasped exactly what that concept is.
So let's try and change that today. How about you tell us a bit about the origin and simplify the concept as much as possible for everyone.
So when we hear Tabyeen, I feel like nowadays in the modern era, we've been using it more and more, especially because social media is something that if you have access to, you can basically change narratives through a post or reels. Like it's accessible to everyone, right? When we're seeing those short reels come out, you talk for 20, 30 seconds, and that has so much information. And people label this as Tabyeen. So Tabyeen, we say the struggle. This specific struggle is struggle to clarify, and it arises when you are in an era of so many misconceptions, so many narratives. This struggle arises and a duty arises to clarify. But if we see this in I would like to say a very limited perspective, as in, okay, I have this problem, I don't agree with this and it's wrong, okay, let me clarify it. But you actually don't understand where it comes from or what I would like to say the divine duty about this concept is, then how will it guide you back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because in every single one of our endeavors, the main thing you wish to do is redirect yourself back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, there is nothing but I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before it, through it, and after it, what did he mean by that? So when we look at these concepts and when we're taking on such heavy responsibility, then these are burdens that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon our shoulders. You have to be able to understand it. And it goes back to the time of Rasulullah. Because when he was given his divine mission, the prophetic mission, he was ordained to go to this society that was heedless. Like we know about the Arabs in the society at the time, they would bury baby girls because, it was something that was, they thought having a girl is, it's a bad thing. They would bury them alive. And Rasulullah is coming into this society and has to talk to such heedless people and such negligent people who have never thought about prostrating towards one God. They were not monotheistic. They took idols and they would worship these people. So Rasulullah probably had the most difficult mission. And despite all of the difficulties he had, despite all the people that went against him, despite the lack of companions he had by his side, he propagated the truth. And at that time, the superpowers were the Persians and the Romans. And he would even write to them to talk about them. He would open dialogue. But because of that, a lot of hardship fell upon the community at that time. And a lot of them would say, Ya Rasulullah, compromise with them, cooperate. Cooperate your principles and the message that you're putting forward. And he never did. He wavered. He never wavered. And he did this. Why? To preserve the light of Islam. And it starts there. It starts with Rasulullah. And we know this because it extends into our Ahlul Bayt. Amir al-Mu'mineen, how difficult his task was. We know that when his time came, the political governance, it was very, very difficult for him, to the point where, for example, in Battle of Siffin, a lot of his good companions, loyal companions, would turn around to him and started questioning him and would say, why are we fighting? Do we really need to fight? And at that point, a really good companion of the Imam, Ammar ibn Yasir, turned around to the companion and said, do you not see this is the flag that Amir al-Mu'mineen is holding is the same flag that was present at Badr? He was saying that truth and falsehood is so obvious in front of you. How are you wavering at the very last moment?
I mean, just on that point, I see that it was very obvious to the very loyal companions of the Imam, but in those battles that you just mentioned, especially in the Battle of Siffin, the enemy was using propaganda to try and confuse the people. So exactly what we're talking about, the information that we're bombarded with and the structural propaganda that we are faced with happened at that time as well. And you can see clear examples in history as well where the people were getting confused. Maybe deep down, they did believe in the mission, or they did believe in the imamate, in the way that imamate needs to be believed in. But again, the information around them, the lies that were being said, the falsehoods that were being expressed, the conniving and deceiving things that were being happening, were playing a part in them shifting.
Exactly. And that's where we have to be so careful, because it can become a very dangerous path. That when you are stood in front of truth and falsehood, that you, at the very last second, you waver, that you're loyal throughout the entire journey, and then when it's absolutely needed for you to stand firm, to believe in what is right and to save the light of Islam, that you waver at that very point. Then you think about, okay, if we start from our Imma, the whole point of their sacrifices, what was it for? At the time of Imam Ali was so important, was because at that time he knew what was happening, right? It's so clear in Nahj al-Balagha, all his sermons, all his letters, for example, when he addresses Malik al-Ashtar, he writes to him. What was that doing? That was Tabyeen, right? He was clarifying. He has whole letters clarifying what exactly is leadership. Why? Because he knew that people after his time would start watering down what exactly divine leadership is and how to act within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine laws. He knew that this would happen. And of course, we know Imam al-Hussein and his battle, and he stood in the face of the tyrant, and he showed us exactly what you're supposed to do when the tyrant is in front of your face. And Sayyidah Zainab, we know this, her sermon in the courtyard of Yazid, what were they doing? Why was their speech so important? Sayyidah Zainab saying, I see nothing but beauty. Why was that so important?
I mean, you're giving lots of amazing examples of exactly how different infallibles, as well as Sayyidah Zainab, did Tabyeen, because obviously it did differ from era to era, from Imam to Imam and at the Prophet's time. But if we were to take a step back and think about us right now, the difference between ourselves and the examples is that as much as we strive to be like them and as much as they are our role models, they had basira. They had 100% basira in what they were doing, because like we said, the timings were different, the rules, the different khalifs that were taking place and things like that. For us, maybe on the surface, if we hear the concept of, okay, we want to clarify the misconceptions against our religion, we want our truth to be a loud voice in the face of falsehood, but how would we even get to a position where we would feel that we're capable of doing something like this?
I think that's why we start with a divine mission, right? Because if we don't think about our work and everything that points like even if, for example, you're working on your career or you're working on your job or anything that you're doing, you're studying, all of this can be a means towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that, I think that relationship that we've become so like distant from, that it's hard to relate to our imma. It's because we don't take this as something that can be, for example, our everyday. So why is it, we talk about having a tawheedi worldview, having a worldview that when we say there is no God but Allah, la ilaha illallah, what does that actually mean? I think because of the world we live in and the landscape that we have, a world that is filled with so many distractions, including like media headlines, we've completely forgotten what exactly it means even to just be human. Because when you see these headlines, even just like take away media narratives for a second, but when we see all the suffering, we've become so like desensitized to it that it's like this is normal. And it, like, if we can, for example, look at that and carry on our lives as normal, it's like, have we forgotten what it actually means to be a human? Do we understand what it actually means to believe in humanity?
I was thinking about this recently, and to be honest, I'm not sure in which battle it was, when after the battle, Imam Ali, I believe, heard that one of the soldiers of his army had ripped, I believe, either an earring or an anklet off a girl, and he said that if any times a man hears of this story and dies from grief,
I wouldn't blame
him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about that and the deepness of that, and comparing it to the examples you were just giving, where we have unfortunately become accustomed to these headlines and the atrocities that are happening and the genocides taking place and the people being killed and all of that. And you just think, I'm really not in line with with where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that's why, again, I want to go back to, like, how would we start that in ourselves? Like, everything that you have said is exactly where we're striving to be. But if a person was sitting and listening, or even for ourselves, and we're like, okay, I acknowledge that there's a gap and this is where I'm trying to get to, how would I start? What would my first steps be? To the way I see it is that you need to have yaqeen in your own beliefs.
Yes.
You need to work so hard on seeking knowledge, on clarifying this truth for yourself, and like arming yourself in basira, in taqiyya, in knowledge, in everything that's happening around you, to first be able to protect yourself from falling into the trap of everything around you. And while doing that, thinking about, okay, how can I help my community in doing that?
Yeah.
Because the idea that we can just automatically do something on a very large scale without having made that moral compass so central in everything that we do, I think would result in what you were saying about sticking to the path and maybe even feeling confident on the path that you're on. And then at the end, when it matters, you waver.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to prevent.
But I think you answered it yourself. You're talking about this. How does one do it? First, you have to think about yourself, right? They say that our scholars, why is it their duty, for example, to guide us? Because only one who's purified himself can start to purify others, right? So it starts there. It starts with yourself. And this journey that we're on, I feel like it's been reduced to a mere, like, this is my life. So I live here in London. I'm going to do my day-to-day. I'm going to go ahead with my duties, and khalas, like, I'm seeing on social media what's happening. Okay, let me share a story. Let me share an Instagram post. Okay, I did my duty. That's it. Let me just now go back home, watch the TV, and that's it. And the next day I'll wake up, okay, I'll like a post.
And we're so sure that doing that is enough.
Enough.
If someone doesn't post about something as well, you're like, oh, this person doesn't care about the cause because they didn't post, because we've made the decision, like the line between right and wrong, or doing your duty or not, we've made it about whether someone posted something.
Do you know what it is? I think it's because when we keep going back to this divine message, it's because we've reduced this to not seeing it as this is like a divine light. Like, what is this all for? So where are we right now? So Rasulullah passed down the message to Imam Ali, and so on and so on and so on. And we're waiting for our Imam to reappear, and we're trying to strive for that. But what is it all all four. Like Rasulullah came, it's like a torch of wilaya. It goes from one person to another, right? And you're passing down this torch. So where are we in the middle? We're here waiting for our imams. So are we carrying that torch, right? But we don't see it as this. We don't see that we could possibly be the ones that are representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this divine message and this divine mission, right?
Well, I think that goes back to, the whole thing of, are we active waiters for the imam of our time to reappear, or are we just passively waiting? And I really think it just goes down to that. That's like the basic thing to it. And I think we are, unfortunately, in two groups going up and down, not completely sure where we stand or what our duty is.
That's why we haven't understood Tabyeen, because I feel like when you hear a concept on social media so much, it gets just like kind of like rinsed quite a bit. Like a lot of people use it, but if you, for example, okay, I want to clarify, I want to propagate Islam, because right now we're in a time where Islam is being attacked left, right, center, and my whole identity is being attacked. Okay, I want to clarify. But if you haven't, for example, understood the message of Rasulullah, for example, and what difficulties he went through, and you're not willing to go on that difficult path, knowing that this path is difficult, and if you're not willing to step out of that, I say, comfort zone, then how are you going to do your duties? How are you going to commit the path of Tabyeen in the first place? I think it also starts there, that when you are living in the West, we are very easy living in this bubble of comfort, and it's so hard to step out of it because we have everything at our fingertips. You need something, order it. And it comes back to this very like comfort bubble that we've become just accustomed to, and the hardest part is to step out of it and let go of things.
I think a step back would be, the hardest part is accepting you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
Because when I speak to so many various different people, when you're so comfortable, you don't realize that
you are
so comfortable, and that it's your duty to try and be comfortable in being uncomfortable. Exactly. You strive towards more comfort.
Yeah.
One thing gets easier for you, you start immediately moving on to, how do I make the next thing easier, instead of actually taking a step back. What you were saying about the information that people get, we've even reached a level, I feel, unfortunately, that we put the duty on, like we come and we say, seeking knowledge, knowledge from the cradle to the grave. We say these things, but then maybe subconsciously, I hope not consciously, we put the burden of the seeking knowledge on others to teach us. We don't actively go and even try and get this kind of information or to clarify things for ourselves. So if a topic comes up, for example, and you're having a conversation with someone, and you're like, XYZ, and they're like, oh, but they didn't mention that in the lecture. No one spoke about it in Muharram. As if automatically the duty of passing on this knowledge has gone on to either our scholars or community leaders, and we've taken the responsibility off ourselves, and we're okay with it.
Exactly. No, you're right. And I was thinking about this because when we talk about Tabyeen and wanting to go on this, this path, you obviously have to compare it to where we are right now, right? And what your living condition is. And I was trying to find this, I would like to say, this bridge between, okay, so it's hard for some people to relate to the Prophet and his time and the Ahlul Bayt and the message of Karbala and to apply it here. Okay, why though? It's because when you're living in the West, there are so many influences that we're not even aware of. And I like to put it into two parts. One is internal, so the internal battle that we have with our nafs. It's been so I would like to say, what's the word, strengthened, because it's like a full-on war with tarbiyah, and when you're growing up, and we don't see it. We're seeing it now because we're trying to rewire our systems. We're trying to go back to our innate nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in us. But we're in an environment that has tried to take God out of the equation entirely. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to be an abd of Allah in a society that doesn't want you to even think about Allah. So when you are in your school system, when you're growing up, even indirectly, the films and TV shows and social media and the way it's affecting you, that has an influence on your mind and your brain and how the way you're perceiving things. So then Islam has that risk of becoming so far away from you that it's not even something that you think about, and that's how the comfort bubble arises. And then the external war is on our identity, So, you know, like practice in your home, do whatever you want in your home, but don't let that show outside. And when you have these two things coupled together, that's like a full-on war on, like, it's hard to live. It feels like it's suffocating to even exist, right? And I think if we become heedless of this and we don't take a step back and think, okay, wait, I'm going through this, and this is something that I need to understand and really focus on. That's where I think goes back to the dangerous slippery slope of not knowing that, okay, then you get comfortable when falsehood is so apparent in your eyes.
I mean, I do pray that inshallah ourselves and everyone really is aware of this bubble and tries to prevent it before they get there. But what happens if by the time you come to the realization you're already in the bubble? Then what would your advice be?
If you're already in the bubble.
Yeah. And then you come to this realization that, oops, I've been in this bubble for so long. I used to like it. Now, not so much. Your filter is trying to shine through.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where to start. I don't know what to do.
I think that's the most difficult part. I think finding where to start is the most difficult part, and then once you start, it gets easier, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises you, right? So when you need to begin, and this is what I'm still a student, and I've noticed what exactly impacts the brain, especially when you're in a university setting, and why identity is such an important thing whilst you're growing up and whilst you're going through your early 20s. And you have to recognize that there is going to be a lot of systems that you're going to have to rewire. So you're thinking of how, what the value of life is, for example, or the value of, for example, as women, what your value is. You are going to have to rewire so many systems and your thinking patterns. And because it's so like in your face all of the time, you know, certain narratives about what it truly means to be a woman, of, you know, femininity and masculinity, all of that has been entirely like changed in our minds, right? These narratives that are being like spewed upon us. It's not just when it comes to, for example, the war front or things that are going on around the world. These are battles that are prevalent everywhere.
No, absolutely. If anything, I think if you find yourself to be a person who is easily swayed when it comes to the very bigger things, it probably started on the smaller things.
On a smaller
it's
scale.
Probably like goes back to the foundation.
Like, where did you compromise there?
What went wrong that this is now confusing you, you know, in the small day-to-day things that happened before?
Like, who's dictating how you think? And this is a very big thing, especially for younger women growing up in the West. Like, who is dictating how you live or what choices you're making? Especially when it comes to social media, for example, you know, hijab has at one point became such a big thing where a lot of girls were, for example, taking off their hijab. But that's because we never understood why we're even wearing it in the first place. So many things about our religion, when you're growing up in the West, it's not taught from a perspective of, okay, this is why. And going back to the root, which is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, everywhere you look, you should see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we're not taught about that from the very beginning. And that's the problem. And so you're now growing up in an environment that basically wants to take God out of the equation. And you're now trying to figure out by yourself. Of course, it's going to be difficult. But I would say a lot of the sacrifices happening around the world is the thing that is waking us up. And the fact that it's had to take so much for us to wake up and for our nafs to yearn for something more, it should be kind of like a wake-up call, you know, for a lot of us. Because, like, why did it take so much sacrifice? Like, the sacrifice, for example, of Imam al-Hussein wasn't enough for us to, you know, never bow down to humiliation. When we say hayhat min nathillah, like, what does that actually mean? Why? And saying, when Imam al-Hussein said, someone like me doesn't pledge allegiance to someone like you, like, what did he actually mean?
I think the key point in what you just said now about exactly, the Imam Hussein said, someone like me.
Someone like me.
Exactly, someone like me. And that someone like me is someone that we're all striving to be like, right? So it is this idea that I need to work on myself. It's not that no one will pledge allegiance. No, I'm sure some people will. But someone like me, and that person that we are trying to be like. And, you know, you said at the beginning, you said, unfortunately, one of the problems that we have is that we see the Ahlul Bayt as role models, but then we see a really big gap between us and them. And in my opinion, that's, you know, of course they were infallible, and of course we're all trying to learn as much as possible and implement the lessons in our life, but yani Allah has created us in a way that we can reach very, very, very high
So
levels.
many stations.
But when we don't believe that about ourselves, and maybe sometimes we have led ourselves to believe it because, you know, we think I have sinned too much or I'm too far. And obviously that in itself is a very grave sin, not having complete hope in Allah's mercy. But again, the propaganda around us and the Western mindset and all of the things that we're surrounded with kind of does make you feel like that as well, that you're so far from something like that, that they take away it. They're very smart in how it's done, right? Because on the one hand, they want to show that you're very powerful while making you feel very powerless. So you don't really believe that you have this power of reaching these really high statuses or like making these decisions on the right path for yourself and sticking to them and being uncompromising. You have a lot of self-doubt. And again, I think that's from the influence of the outside, because Allah has created us for so much more.
And the thing that we forget is, wouldn't the one that created you know you the best? So if he created you, doesn't he know why he's putting these rules into place? When he tells you not to do a certain sin, do you think there must be like a reason why? And you know, we see so many celebrities, for example. People have everything in the whole world. Like, they've chased, they have money, they have everything that you could possibly need, and in the end, or what do they commit suicide. Exactly. Why? Because our entire journey, our entire life, unfortunately, as humans, we try to always attain happiness, and we want to feel the thing that gives us the most immense power, and the thing that makes us feel most joyful, because this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us. He made us creatures that yearn. He's put this fitrah, this innate disposition inside of us that we yearn. But then at the same time, he sent down so many rules and guidance. He didn't leave us alone. He didn't say, okay, let me put you into this world and I'm not going to help you. He said, take one step towards me and I will take 10 towards you. Why do we have so many? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then reassure you so much? With hardship comes ease. But he doesn't even say it once. He says it twice. With hardship comes ease. He's not even saying that after the hardship the ease will come. He's saying with it, you just just take it, and the hardship, it's going to go away, because I'm promising you this. And there's so many other references, like he promises victory to the believers, and he's reassuring you and he's promising you. But this innate nature that we have, this disposition, it constantly wants more, though, and it constantly chases it. And of course, your environment is not going to help if it's conditioned you to believe that is what you should be doing, that is what you should be yearning for, working towards. And in all, like, you're just rewiring these systems in your brain, right? Like, you're trying to actually figure out what it means to be a human. You're actually figuring out what it means to be a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's difficult, but it's meant to be difficult.
It's meant to be difficult, but also it's you're not alone in it, right? Yeah, Allah already created you in a way where you have your innate goodness. You have the thing inside of you that is striving for goodness and is happy and content when they do good and feels guilty when they do. So Allah has already given us that. And then Allah, like we said, has already promised us that when you take a step towards me, I come to you. So we're not alone in this process, even though it might sound a bit scary, especially if all of a sudden, you know, you wake up and you're like, I'm in this. And I think that's why, going back to the idea of Tabyeen, it's not just about verbal clarification of misconceptions. I believe, like, I actually did read the book Tabyeen, the Neglected Obligation, a few years ago, so I'm not very it's not at the tip of my tongue, all the quotes, but it is a process, and that process starts with the work that you do on yourself, with the intention of why you're doing it. And so it goes more than just being like a verbal thing. It's in your actions, it's in your intentions. And that's why, like, the examples that you were giving at the beginning, obviously throughout the Ahlul Bayt, each the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Imams, the method of Tabyeen was tailored to the oppressors of their time. And we could maybe say that, you know, obviously the message never changed, but the vessel that the message traveled through, from the Prophet down to the Imams, was adapted as it was needed. So how does that relate to us in even understanding the situation we're in, to be able to decide, okay, what is my duty right now? Obviously, it's not going to be the same, let's say, if I know you're doing your master's now, so imagine you're in uni and you're having like a debate with certain etiquettes and things like that. Or if you were maybe at Speaker's Corner, let's say, or maybe something on social media. These are very different environments, very different audiences. So how would we address that? The idea that you do have an obligation, but
What is it exactly?
what is it, and how does where you are, who the person is, the situation, the scenario, how does that play a role?
What's funny is I think it keeps going back to the self, because I think I really, really do believe that if you haven't understood yourself and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and where exactly you're going, it's going to be extremely difficult to find out what you're doing. And we know this. We know that every single person has its own duties, has its own individual responsibilities. You mentioned that we keep going back to, purification. Like, for example, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, his duty was so different because it was post-Karbala. And we know that during that time, Imam al-Baqir's time, a lot of sects were being created, for example, and they were kind of trying to erase the message of Karbala entirely. But Imam al-Baqir knew this, understood this, and he opened a dialogue. And a lot of disbelievers at that time would basically fabricate narrations and then attach it to him. But he wouldn't just let that happen. He would go out, he would open debates, he would
start schools, because obviously this all goes back to knowledge and the knowledge that you have.
Exactly. But I think we're in this era that we don't try to learn exactly about our imams and the way they acted in different situations, in different eras, and then understanding your own era and your own self. And until you do that, then how do you expect to even begin the journey? Because the path of knowledge is not confined to the scholar. It's encouraged to all of us to go out, learn your creed, learn your deen, learn who you are, because he who knows himself knows his Lord. That what does that entire narration that we hear constantly, what does that mean? Because the person who hasn't understood himself, the person who hasn't understood his own nafs, is a slave to the dunya. When it sees its goals, when it sees its dreams, when it sees its aspirations, it only sees the material and the end goal, the external goal. It never sees beyond it. Why is it that Imam Ali alayhi salam, he divorced the world 3 times? Like, what does that mean? Our Imam never saw the world. In all their tasks and every obligation they had towards the people, they never saw this world. They never thought that this external result is the one that's going to be important. So when we embark on every single one of our duties, the most number one thing we should be looking out for is, who am I doing this for and why? For example, if I'm going on this path of Tabyeen, I want to propagate, I want to, for example, be a person who clarifies for the people that are, trying to dim the light of Islam. Why? Is it for yourself? Who is it for? Is it taking you back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
I mean, other than just thinking about it on very large scale, something that I feel has helped me is just constant reflection and being honest with yourself. So you can be on a large mission, like the one that you just said, but then I still think it's very important to analyze every single step in that process and being very honest and thinking, why did I do this? Or why did I say this? And what position did I say this from? When it comes to, the Prophet and the Prophet of mercy, his message was also always in a way of kindness and in a way of trying to give guidance, not because he didn't want anyone to be misinformed. He didn't want anyone to make these mistakes. But sometimes when it comes with us and the idea that we want to do, let's say, tabyeen or play our role in the community, we need to be very clear with our own intention between us and ourselves as to really why am I doing this and what position am I doing this from. So I think this for me has been really beneficial, where if you can regularly throughout the day, obviously it's a bit unrealistic with the very fast-paced lives we all have, but if you commit to like 10-15 minutes at the end of the night where you're like, okay, today I did XYZ, why did I do this? Do I still stand by what I did?
Like muhasaba.
Yes, hold yourself accountable. Unfortunately, again, we're at a time where the majority of people around you are going to compliment you. It's going to be very rare that you have friends or family members that are going to come and be like, hey, exactly. Be like, when you said this, I don't think it was right. Or are you sure about this? Everyone's trying to please everyone. Everyone's trying to avoid any kind of sensitivity that can be risen. And so again, that means the responsibility needs to go back on ourselves and just hold ourselves accountable, be honest with ourselves, so that we can go, inshallah, to higher and higher statuses.
And what you're talking about, it made me remember how our shuhada were shuhada because they lived like one, and we often forget this. Imam al-Hussein, being the greatest martyr, he was the greatest martyr, and he was able to reach that high station because he lived like one. And often we forget that. We think about martyrdom and we think about, you know, this great sacrifice, but really and truly what our imams always teach us, and what they go back to us, and what our scholars and teachers have always talked about, is whenever you're talking about martyrdom and you're talking about being this, you know, sacrificing everything for the cause of Islam, your actions and the way you are spending that time, perhaps leading up to that moment, is one that matters the most, right? And like, why is it that Imam al-Hussein, before he left for Karbala in Dua Arafah, like, we see the way he expresses his love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he says it's as if, you know, this world never existed and the hereafter is all there ever was. Like, why? Because their worldview was so strong and established in Tawheed, that I see nothing but God, and every action of mine is going to lead me back to Allah. But nowadays, you know, we can say the Shahada, but unfortunately our actions, they don't align to it. Unfortunately, Shaitan is at its, like, you know, full speed with us, and we don't even realize, we don't even recognize. And we have to be able to, like you said, not only hold ourselves accountable, but the people around us, because only you can, you know, start a movement that is so strong if you have the right people around you. And even when we're, for example, deciding our life paths, and, you know, we keep going back to the question, okay, why are you doing it? I think sometimes it's just very simple, because you have to see why you are doing this and what exactly it's moving you towards. So, for example, when I was thinking about, okay, I want to study law, you know, it was one of those things where you're like, I'm not really good at anything else. You know, I really suck at maths, and I'm really, really bad at science, and but I really like writing, but I don't really want to do English. That's not really something I want to do. And law was right then. I was like, okay, let me pick this. And I did it, and I started my undergrad. And during your undergrad, you I like to say, you know, before you make a very big decision, you should always in your head have, okay, where is this going to take me? So I'm like, okay, what do I want to do when I graduate? And I realized that I enjoyed studying it so much because I was able to understand man-made concepts, and it led me to see God more in it. So even when you're studying, it should take you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, I was in my undergrad is when October 7th happened, for example. And you're studying human rights law, and you're in a class studying conventions and human rights systems,
An international
law that doesn't exist for your own people. So what do you do then? And that shows me God more. Okay, so then, like, these Western systems aren't made for us. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how it should be treated. These people, these leaders, they've, like, construed the message so much. But who didn't? Who is trying to hold on to that message so much? Our scholars, our leaders, our Ahlul Bayt. That divine light is still trying to be ablaze during, like, this chaotic and turbulent period that we're going through. And even in those moments, I decided, okay, I don't want to practice, because I don't want to practice law. It doesn't make sense to me. That's not my duty. I don't feel I can make as big of an impact. And so I decided to go for, you know, academics. I thought, okay, I can make more of a difference if I can read and write, because everything that you hold on to, how is history made? It's written. How is our knowledge passed on? It's in books. And I fell in love with it, and I was like, this is my duty, because even when I'm in this environment that is trying to take me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm only reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. But that, unfortunately, will have to happen after a lot of difficulties, and after you get a taste of what life is without the light of Allah.
I mean, I think 2 points I want to follow up on from that. One, I'll get back to the difficulties, and, you know, unfortunately, as soon as someone says the word difficulty, automatically you think that I want to stay away from it, instead of thinking to yourself, actually, I might want to embrace this because of the beauty and the blessings and the good deeds that's going to come with it, depending on the situation. But the other point you mentioned about everything that we do for the sake of Allah, that's exactly it. Like, the way I see it, or the way I even tell my daughters, is that, look, For example, you have your GCSEs. This is your goal for next year, but it's a small goal that's part of a bigger goal. You need to have your ultimate goal so clear to yourself and make sure that any other thing that you do that's leading you to there is a step in the right direction. Someone could come and say, well, law isn't going to benefit your religion at all. Someone else can be like, well, actually, no, I'm going to be studying law because I want to clarify the lies that are going around right now. I want to be able to do it from an academic, legal standpoint. And so I'm going to continue this topic for this goal. And I think, again, that's one of the things that we need to keep ourselves in check with, is every step that you're taking, whether it's in your academic life, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal life when it comes to, I don't know, your marriage, your children, your extended family. How does this align with my ultimate goal? Exactly. But you can only do that if you have really understood what your ultimate goal is.
Exactly. And what you're saying reminds me of the fact that our tradition is rooted in struggle. Everything that we talk about, like the whole our shahada that we keep going back to, there is no one but God, it's rooted in struggle. And like from young, we're taught to detest your urges, to constantly put down your nafs and purify it, right? And you're loved by God. You move to higher stations if you are able to defeat your ego, if you're able to purify the nafs so much that you only see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's the biggest struggle, right? The struggle of the nafs.
Exactly, Jihad al-Akbar. But then how loved could someone be if, for example, that person not only is able to resist himself, but be able to resist the society around him that is trying to take him away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think there are many layers and there's many facets to moving through these stations. And if it was only going to be about yourself and it was never going to be about other people and feeling, like we said, the genocide happening around the world, if it was never to be about other people, then we would have been made unconditionally selfish. But that's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us. Like you said, we feel pain when our brothers and sisters are in pain.
We're supposed to.
That's how Allah made us. But if we only let that pain help our movement only to a certain extent, that's when we're making a loss.
So we know these things, right? We've all heard the hadith about the Muslim ummah is one body. If one body part is hurting, we should all be hurting. We're familiar with the concept and we could even perhaps be able to speak about it. But then when it comes to our day-to-day action, I still think that when you're faced at a crossroads and one path is quite easy and the other one a bit difficult, it may not be our instinct to go towards the difficult path, even if we know that it's the right one. So why do you think that many of us are so reluctant to choose the harder path, even when we intellectually and spiritually know that it's the right one?
Because we're comfortable. Like we said, we're in this bubble and we choose it every day. And if you are struggling up on this, I would say don't turn your face away from it. Like, yes, grieve and it's hard, but feel for those those suffering. Know that you are in a position of advantage. That's the only difference between you and them is geographical luck. Like, you could have been them. You could have been. It's just regional differences, right? See the oppression, feel it, but don't turn your face away from it. Like, why are you turning away? Like, grieve, mourn, and then go out and see what you can do. It's make it a part of your life. But unfortunately, I don't think we're ready to make it a part of our life. We're not ready to make it our identity.
I think it's that, and also going back to feeling a bit powerless. A lot of people are like, well, what can I do? It's such a large-scale institutional.
But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never tells you that you're going to be the one that's making the outcomes.
Nor has He ever said that He's going to be judging you on the outcomes. But it is the struggle, exactly, and
He
the
makes the outcomes, exactly. Yeah. But that's the thing, once you've understood your duty, even just as a human being, because that's what we're not talking about enough, the fact that this entire world has stripped us of what it means to be a human, what it means to be alive, what humanity even really is, that how have we normalized seeing these things via social media? Like, how has it become normal that we just scroll past it? Like, and this is what they want. They want us to become a bit desensitized, because once you see so much of something, it's so much more easier to just let that be your reality and let it just settle in.
It's so true, because honestly, unfortunately, like personally speaking as well, at the beginning, right after October 7th, I was not sleeping. The videos that we were seeing, the scenes that were available, it was something I had never seen, and I was losing sleep and I couldn't eat. And 3 years on now, nearly,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that kind of
It settles.
physical and
Yeah.
emotional distress is not as present as it was. Not that that equates with not caring. If anything, I think I'm probably angrier now than I was even at the beginning. But you have to, it's like this balance that you're trying to find, one from caring, but one from continuing what your duty is. Now, your duty, depending on who you are, it might be to continue functioning as a human for the sake of your children.
Yeah.
You know, as a woman, it could be continuing to do your community service work that you're doing. For our scholars, it could be continuing the preparation of their lectures and their speeches and their, you know, and attending. And it's really hard, because sometimes even that I feel guilty about. It's a really tough balance of trying to figure out, like, how do you live?
How do I live? Yeah.
How do I control this sadness while not trying to hide it, not trying to shield my kids or anyone from it, but also from continuing, because you're raising a generation, you're raising, you know, the next people who are also going to have to be dealing with this, unfortunately.
You know, as you're talking, it's like it comes, I think the answers are right there. Like, it was never meant to be about seeing how can I make, you know, the biggest difference. You raising, for example, your children on this right path, and the path of fi sabilillah, that's all my actions are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and never allowing yourself to be that comfortable. That can be a means, for example, for the imam. Like, we, I think, underestimate and undermine our actions and the greatness that a human being can attain. Like, human perfection is something that we can all strive towards. It's not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made inaccessible for us. He's put it in front of us. We can get there. But I think at the end of the day, sometimes we just undermine ourselves, and in the hustle of, you know, this lifestyle, I like to say this capitalistic consumerism lifestyle, you know, 9 to 5, get home, it becomes basically a repeat, right? And very rarely this world, especially living in the city, allows you to step back a little bit and see the bigger picture, because constantly this world, and it keeps going back to the environment that we're raised in, has raised you in a way to become just kind of like in this rat race. And when a human being is so accustomed to this rat race, you're only going to think about the end result of that.
I was just going to say, so the problem with the rat race isn't just that you're so occupied that you're not even aware of everything outside it, but when you're living in this very consumerist, capitalistic world, your goals become capitalistic and consumerism oriented kind of goals.
Yeah.
And that's probably where the struggle is, and that might be one of the reasons that we go to majalis 10 days of Ashura, and we will stand there and proudly and with full yaqeen say that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was victorious.
Yeah.
And the example is like as clear as day, that it was martyrdom, it was a much larger army killing everyone, taking the woman, and yet they were victorious, and we believe in that victory, and we commemorate that victory, and we learn from that victory. But when we're in that rat race, because our goals have shifted due to what we have surrounded ourselves with, we start seeing our goal differently. We start seeing hardship as something that we want to try and avoid. Because sometimes, by the way, you just feel like, I don't have time for this because I'm in such a in such a rush to do things. I don't have time. I don't have this. But again, I think, you know, I feel like the story of Ashura and, you know, Karbala and Imam al-Hussein and, you know, the context before it and after it has so many answers for all of the questions that we have. But we just need to be a bit more open to connecting those lessons with our day-to-day life, with ourselves as individuals and the potential that we have, that Allah has bestowed upon us, and with the power that we feel in ourselves. And similar to what you said, not belittling the small things. Not everyone can go and do something really big.
Or it was never meant to be about the large scale movements.
Exactly. But again, it's part of the society that we live in,
it.
that your small day-to-day thing, for example, cooking for your child with the intention of strengthening them to become, inshallah, soldiers of Imam al-Zaman, is highly rewarded. It's you're getting so much. But all of these small actions have been belittled into thinking that you have to be doing something really, really big.
And it has to be seen as well.
And it has to be seen, and people need to speak about it and like it, and for it to be valid. And I think that also plays a role in why so many people feel powerless. Not because they're actually very powerful, but because we've been brainwashed into thinking these small actions that are either your duty in Islam, or it's a service that you are providing for your family, for your extended family, for, your small circle around you, is just not valued as much. And unfortunately, I think that is not just to be blamed on the West and all the other tools that we were talking about, but even really our communities themselves.
100%, because we haven't even focused on these topics. Like, for example, when you told me we're gonna talk about Tabyeen and this duty to clarify, especially given the circumstances of our ummah, I was like, oh, okay, this is really good, because we're not doing it enough, and it's not spoken about from the minbar enough, and a lot of our centers are shying away from such important duties that are heavy. It's heavy because we have to teach our children, we have to teach the youth. The book Tabyeen, the Neglected Obligation by Sayyid Khamenei, all of it, all the lessons that are in there, and we highly recommend you to read this book, because he addresses every single person, from a working man to a working woman to a mother to a child.
He empowers everyone.
He is the one who shows you that no matter what you're doing, you can serve the Imam, you can serve the Islamic movement, you can hold that torch in everything that you do. And why is it that the youth and the university students are so important in that? Because education is the thing that will empower Tabyeen. If you stay a bit heedless and you shy away from everything that's happening, then you're being that block yourself to your potential that can save Islam, that can carry on this light. But unfortunately, we don't see it like this way. And even we're in the month of Muharram right now, and we're talking about these beautiful traditions that we need to hold on to, right? But we rarely talk about that, why after Ashura, that 40-day period from Arba'in, why are those 40 days, for example, so important? We don't remember that the calamities that befell Sayyidah Zainab and the women of the caravan and Imam al-Sajjad, that entire period, those 40 days, was Tabyeen in itself. For example, Sayyidah Zainab saying, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila," her saying, "I see nothing but beauty." It's not that she's saying, right in front of me, I see nothing but beauty. She's saying, no, between everything, all of it, I only see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything I have. Before this and after this, exactly what Amir al-Mu'mineen said. When Imam al-Sajjad is in chains, and through his supplications, he uses these chains to show a metaphor for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love. That's Tabyeen. It's clarifying how exactly our shahada should be lived. But rarely we use these divine days, these days that can be made for transformation, to hold on to the legacies and the life lessons that after Ashura, what happened. Because after Ashura, it's very obvious that they try to get rid of the message, get rid of the eternal message of Imam al-Hussein. They try to eradicate it. They would, set different narratives. No, it didn't happen this way. It wasn't like that. Of course, why? Because they wanted to get rid of it. It was the promise. There was a promise made that this legacy of Imam al-Hussein,
so the responsibility fell on Imam Sajjad and Sayyidah Zainab to clarify the truth,
and they
stick to the truth, stand against the falsehood that was being spread. And the Arba'in that you mentioned, the 40 days, I really think it transforms grief into a movement. The day of Ashura is a very sacred, emotional day where everything takes place, but the movement continues after that. And I think those 40 days and the things that took place as well, they teach us they teach us how to process hardship and not just to endure it. And that's the difference when Sayyidah Zainab says, "I see nothing but beauty." It's because she didn't just endure it. She dealt with it in the best of ways, in the way that she was getting the best thing that she could get out of that situation, and use it wisely. It's been a really nice conversation, and I know we can go on for a really long time, but unfortunately it is coming close to the end. But I just wanted to end with, we mentioned it a few times, but it is really important to remember that Islam's promise of victory is real. But it does require the believers to show up. And Allah's promise to us has never been conditional on ease. It's been conditional on effort and sincerity. And I think when you sit with that and you think about that on a very deep level, it's actually really liberating. So inshallah, that's a takeaway that people can have. But just inshallah, that this episode is going to help us all in having deep conversations with ourselves on what kind of Muslimin we want to be while waiting for the Imam of our time, and what our duty is in his ghaibah, and inshallah praying together for his reappearance. I really want to thank you for your time today. Honestly, really enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening. Inshallah, you found this episode as beneficial as I did. And we're looking forward to having you on another episode of Her Progeny. Thank you.